God has been so good to me. I was doing something recently. I don't know if I was running or cycling or something, and I just realized that at every turn in my life, God has shown me nothing but beauty, and people, in circumstances, and the responsibilities I've been given, and I don't deserve any of it. That's the thing, none of it.
Hello and welcome to Chat CTK, a podcast exploring life and faith at Christ the King Catholic Church in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm your host, John Stotts, Director of Adult Faith Formation here at CTK. In this episode, I'm joined for one last time by Father Dexter Brewer, pastor of Christ the King for these last 17 years. We talk about his plans for retirement, the significance of prudence in his life, the dog, not the virtue, and what his time at Christ the King has meant to him. Thank you for being here one last time.
Oh, sure. Gosh, the end of an era, really.
It is. I want to start with a direct question.
Sure.
So you're healthy. You seem to have a good situation here. Life seems to be going well. Why retire? Why not just kick around here for a number of years?
I was thinking about that this morning, as I was driving to the YMCA. I thought, do you go to failure? People sometimes drive their cars to failure.
Yeah.
And I think often priests do the same thing. We work to failure, but I don't know that that's the best way to live life. I think, as you say, this is the most comfortable place. It really is. Christ the King is just an extraordinary place. But there comes a time, as I've said at Mass over the last couple of weeks, that when you realize it's time to go. It's because you don't know what's out there. It can be a little, not frightening so much as unnerving. But it is important, I think, sometimes to decide, it's time to go. And so in talking with the bishop, I said, I've been 18 years at Christ the King. I need to let the people go.
Yes.
And so it's all good.
Yeah. And now we need to let you go.
Yeah. Right.
What are your plans? What are you going to spend your time on?
Well, first I will kind of step away from the responsibility, and I think it'll take a week or two, or maybe more, just to get out of this rhythm, this habit, and to put aside the burden of responsibility of all of it, and then having done that, and maybe taken a few trips here and there. Not that I want for travel, but having taken a few trips, I think I'll probably kind of jump into some areas that I've always wanted to explore more, both in study and in the practice of civil law.
Okay.
But something simple. I mean, not anything that's overwhelming, because I am retired. I'd like to have that free time, but I'd like to be helpful too in some way.
Yeah. Can you say more about what you hope to study?
Yeah, I love art history.
Yeah.
So I look for courses online, and I'm looking for something that will allow me to study, and then maybe to go to the various museums around the world. And look at the paintings that I've always loved.
Yeah.
When I was an undergrad, one of my favorite courses was in art history. And I can still remember the professor. Her name was Gloria Curry, and she, in the hour and a half that the class, the duration of the class, she could make buildings walk and paintings talk.
Oh man!
She was it was just extraordinary. So she enkindled in me this love for art history and all things art, and so I'd like, and that was just a course. So I'd like to do a little more of it.
Yeah, and then you could plan an itinerary around seeing specific pieces.
Yes,
all
right,
over
right.
the world.
Which is what I do anyway when I go to the museum.
Yeah.
So because I think museums are overwhelming, and unless you have a purpose, like if you go to the Louvre in Paris and I mean, it's huge.
Yes.
So unless you have some intention, I mean, you come out with a headache rather than having enjoyed the place.
Right.
And so anyway, I'd like to do that with more intention. So.
You're known for being rather cosmopolitan in your practices and your tastes. You're someone who loves theater, who loves literature, both high forms and Harry Potter. But and these come up in your homilies. How has that affected your priesthood to be somewhat worldly in some ways, to enjoy the things of the world?
I've always thought that grace builds on nature. So.
Did you come up with that?
No, someone else said. I don't remember who it was. Maybe you do remember. Anyway, in any event, so early on in my priesthood, I thought, I want to be me, and Dexter is this person who likes these things and has always done these things. So I'd like to continue those things, and hopefully, being me will help me to be a better priest. But in any event, I didn't want to give up that, and so I continued to travel and to read things that I like, not just theology,
Sure.
but I like fiction. I really do. I think there's a lot to be learned in fiction. I think there's a lot of theology in fiction because it doesn't, in some ways, it doesn't intend to be. Theology books are written, with a focus on God,
right?
And they're trying to explain things that are often unexplainable, but fiction often, just in telling stories, speak about a truth that's pretty deep.
Sure.
And so that's what I've always enjoyed.
Yeah, even if you look at theological study or the study of church history or any of these more objective in some ways areas, they're all stories. They're even theology is stories of people trying to figure these things out and competing stories and stories that don't add up. But I think it may just be stories all the way down.
Yeah.
So fiction or nonfiction, when people are trying to make meaning and then come up against things that just don't make sense, I think something beautiful happens. And if we can record that and capture it. What have been some of the highlights of your priestly ministry here at Christ the King?
The main highlight is the presiding over Eucharist. I love that more than anything. I've said so often that when I gather to preside over the Eucharist, the people do something for me that's that can only be the Spirit's working. And so and then it even if I step in and I'm not feeling up to it or kind of myself, once we begin the dialogue, the Lord be with you, something happens and I find a strength or something that I didn't have before. I have often felt since the first day, that very first time that I attended Mass when I was an undergrad, I've often felt the Spirit's working in there. I mean, just moving around and doing things that have very little to do with me or but is active. Active and working really. I think it's almost always Pentecost too.
Yeah.
So it's just a marvelous thing. So that's the highlight, and of course within that, the celebration of Eucharist, the high celebrations, Christmas and Easter, they're exhausting, quite frankly, emotionally and other ways, and physically, really, especially the Easter Vigil, which is, just there's just so much to it.
Yes.
But they're a joy, and they have been. Other highlights, just the people. This is Christ the King is one of the most welcoming and loving places I've ever been. The fact that they would allow me to be pastor, I think, is a sign that it's the most extraordinary place. I certainly don't deserve it, and I'm worthy in so many ways, but I will miss the relationships that with people that I formed relationships with, and the comfort that comes from that, the caring. I often tell my siblings that I have people.
Yeah.
So we'll talk either by Zoom or on the phone about things that they're having to do, and I say, well, I have people to do that. And it's been marvelous, for the last 18 years to have people.
Yeah.
We talk about things, and then and then they happen because people make them happen, and I've not had to do everything myself,
Yes.
or anything really. I just kind of reside.
And so now you'll go into the world people-less.
Yes. So the other day I was I drove my car into the garage, and my Jeep with the top down, and so I ripped off that little top. It's really a water barrier, I think, and I realized that I had best learn to do this myself now. And so rather than asking, those here on campus who do those things to do it, I went and figured out how to do it myself.
Yes. Well, hopefully you'll have still some people to rely on.
I don't know who they are.
They'll come.
Prudence, maybe.
Prudence. Yeah. What does Prudence think about your retirement?
She hates it.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Okay. We have spent the last 3 nights at my condo, and she still can't imagine being away from the mansion. She calls this the mansion. And whenever we walk in, she has a look on her face that says, I don't know what you plan on doing here, but I don't plan on living here. Yeah, that's what. Yeah. If she could speak, that's what she would say.
Yeah.
But slowly, I hope. I brought her toys over, and a really big dog that's like 6 times her size.
Yeah.
So hopefully that'll help her.
A toy dog.
A toy dog,
right.
Dog,
yes.
That'll help her to feel at home,
Okay, I hope it works. I remember the early days of Prudence.
She was as big as your palm.
She was. She was adorable. How has she changed you?
Prudence has changed me. Yes, I'm talking about you. She's sitting here, in amazing ways. She's taken me out of myself. Generally, before Prudence, there was no constant responsibility of another being. I mean, I have parishioners, and so I can visit parishioners and I can tend to them, but they go home, and ultimately, they are not my day-to-day responsibility, in the sense that they live here and on and on. And so, because of that, I think priests generally can grow to be very selfish. With our time, I could go to the gym anytime I wanted, I could run anytime I wanted, I could travel anytime I wanted. But when you have another to care for, on a day-to-day basis, like a child, you have to decide, okay, can I do this now? She has to be fed. She needs water. She needs to go out a certain number of times a day. She needs to have someone who cares for her when I'm not here. So I can't just kind of up and leave anymore. Right. So all those things have been very good for me, because I think it's important to practice caring for someone, And priests don't have spouses or significant others, and so it's.
That's interesting because, in some ways we're taught that the purpose of, celibacy, of the solitary life, to be freed of having to care for individuals, frees you to sort of care about everyone and frees you to be, a pastor. But it sounds like there's a missing piece here, or at least was for you.
There is. Absolutely. I mean, and I think there's something to that. Though, of course, our Eastern brothers and sisters,
Sure.
our Eastern brother priests,
Yeah.
have many of them have spouses. But I have found that the celibate life does allow me a freedom to, to interact with people, in a way that I couldn't do if I had a spouse. But the piece that's missing is I do believe everyone needs someone or something that on which they can pour out their care,
Yeah.
that they're responsible for in a more kind of constant way.
Yes.
And Prudence has provided that for me.
Must it be a dog? Could a cat work?
A cat wouldn't work.
Cat wouldn't work. Okay.
I mean, I'm not a cat guy. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not sure that cats need people in the same way that dogs need people. Like you can leave for a day or 2 days and leave a cat, a litter bed and food, and the cat will survive.
May even prefer it. Some cats. They may even prefer your absence.
Right. Yes. But I don't think a dog could. I mean, Prudence would. I don't think it'd work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
first, they can't use a litter bed, a little box or whatever those things are, and so she needs to go out. So someone's got to do that.
Right.
Those things were.
What won't you miss about pastoral responsibilities, about your life here?
What won't I miss? I like things. I won't miss, finding things broken and having to fix them. I mean, not people and things, but I mean buildings and.
Okay.
Whenever I walk into a room and I see something that isn't as it should be because something has failed, I find those things disturbing because I guess maybe I'm a little OCD. I like things, except for my room, in order. I like buildings fixed. I like the lawn looking nice.
And you're responsible for it.
Yes,
as pastor.
I like. I like the floors of the church looking nice. I like things in order. And while we have people here who take care of those things, when I see them, and I have to make it known that these things are broken or need attention, I find it's weight on my shoulders because I just like things right.
Yeah.
The vestments clean.
Yeah.
And those things are always done, but I just need those things done.
Okay.
So I won't miss that.
Okay.
It'll be someone else's responsibility. John's.
Indeed.
Good for it.
Anything else you're glad to be putting down?
I think the rest of it, for the most part, is nothing but joy.
Yeah.
And I think, so what we do in retirement is we move. A priest doesn't, of course, retire from priesthood. We are always a priest, even, but what you retire from are the responsibilities that come from administration, the meetings, especially diocesan meetings and things like that, which have been a big part of my own life, I'm not a fan of meetings. I think they should be as short as possible and only called when they're needed.
Yes. Clear agenda,
Right.
starting and ending
Yes,
time.
absolutely. Right.
Yeah, I'm there too.
Anyway, so
Yeah. You've been a priest for 35 years?
36.
36 years.
36.
With that experience, what have you come to believe about priesthood? What does it mean to be a priest?
The priest is, I think, primarily a prayer, someone who, because of his life of prayer, kind of intercedes for everyone else. I mean, all those in his care, and who assures them, not by words, but by presence that God is mindful, and all will be well.
Yeah.
That's. I think a priest is a symbol that God is with us, and caring.
You said something there, not by words, but
Not
by
by
presence.
not by words, by
Say
presence.
more about that. How does the
Well,
presence convey that?
I think words fail us, and often we turn to them trying to describe, to talk about things that really are only, in my judgment, communicated by presence itself. When at the Eucharist, when I'm preaching, for example, I don't know if the words matter so much. I think I try to use the words to pierce people, and myself first, but then others, but it's something else that's happening that that's most important, and it's a feeling. It's I don't know. It's hard to describe, but again, words fail. So I think the importance of the priest has more to do with his being, not what he does, but with his being, with whatever spirit there is that inhabits him, and imparting that to people. And that spirit is mostly to let people know a peace and that God is among us, and that all is well.
Circling back to something you said at the beginning about why you love celebrating the liturgy, it sounds like some of this is that you kind of get out of the way.
I do. I've always thought that my job as pastor was to get out of the way,
Yeah.
But certainly at Eucharist, and the Eucharist allows that.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And in the sessions that I've had with those who are entering the full communion with the church, I've made that point that the priest presides over the liturgy, but it's the work of the people. I mean, both those who bring the word to us, those who bring a song, the people's responses, the way that we care for one another when we gather there, the things that we do. But the priest is, he has to be there because, that can't start or end without him. But it's not about him, it seems to me. It's about all of us. And so you do kind of get out of the way.
Yeah.
And I like watching it happen. I like being there in the midst of it when it does happen.
Yeah.
And it's less burdensome that way too. If I think that I've got to run the whole show, then that it can be something that I don't look forward to. But as in so many other aspects of my priestly life, I found that I don't have to run everything. There are lots of people who can do things much better, and they ought to be doing them. So get out of the way and let them do them.
Yeah.
So,
which is probably why you can make the decision to retire at a good time, because you don't have the compulsive need to keep running things or to keep.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Right.
It's marvelous freedom. If you visited here in 10 years after being away, what would you hope to see?
I would hope to see the parish thriving as it seems to be now, and I'd hope to hear all the children, crying and shouting at Mass at 8:30 and at 11 o'clock. I would hope to see a community that is alive and joyful, and that continues to welcome everybody, and people who feel lost because there's no place for them.
Yeah.
That's what I would hope.
Any final words for parishioners who are listening?
I guess I'd say that God is good. God has been so good to me. I was doing something recently. I don't know if I was running or cycling or something, and I just realized that at every turn in my life, God has shown me nothing but beauty, nothing but beauty. In people, in circumstances, in the responsibilities I've been given, and I don't deserve any of it. That's the thing, none of it. But it's all been just incredibly beautiful. So, if there is a last word, it is that God is good, and trust Him. Okay.
Thank you for everything.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to Chat CTK, a podcast exploring life and faith at Christ the King Catholic Church. This podcast is written, directed, and recorded by John Stotts. CTK parishioner Brian Steinberg graciously donates his time to edit and produce the podcast. You can find new episodes at ctk.org/chatctk, or you can subscribe to it using Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app.